In today's class, we're going to focus on variations and progressions of flexibility for lower extremities. We're going to start without springs. We're going to put the short box on up against the shoulder rest. Now you can see I've got the extended platform pads. You can use whatever you want. I'm going to place all three of them on the edge of the front, the frame, over the gray strip. Place one to center and then two at the edges, the sides. Let's first sit down. And for some of your students, the newer students that are really tight will actually feel a lot with this. So what I want you to do is just experience it yourself so you know how challenging it may be. If you're going to do the class with me, follow along and modify for anything that doesn't work. The way I teach in my method classes is I tell the students when you've reached your maximum flexibility where you can hold and maintain good form, that's where you stay. So if at point one, our students move to point two and they are out of alignment or find knee pain or something, then we won't even take them to set three, point three. We'll keep them at point one. And let me explain. We're going to first start with our foot on the floor at an angle towards the front. Then we're going to move it center, getting a little bit more adductor stretch. Then for those of us that has flexibility, we're going to even move it to the back. Really watch for rolling in of that leg. So really keep that external rotation. Now, if this is the first time you've done any of the variations with me where we're progressing up from standard to more advanced, even the foot on the bar, or we'll do the feet on the frame, you just want to take it where you can. And I like doing this variation even with my intermediate to advanced or all level classes, is I like to take them through the progressions, probably a little quicker, not as much time on explaining what we're trying to find as though they should know already. So let's start with both knees bent. Now I've got 90 degrees on both. I'm going to hug myself pretty close to that box. So just by doing that, that's going to give me something stable, because a lot of the times when we do rotation or we do some movement of the spine, whether it's laterally flexed, forward extension, or rotation, you're going to see a lot of movement in the pelvis. So in my method classes, I want to make sure that I find a more stable base for our students to stabilize themselves in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach. Now let's say my arm length is not long enough to grab that rope or the strap. I'm going to just slide forward. Now I'm going to get that there. And that in and of itself may be challenging for students. Then I'm going to place my other hand on, and I'm just going to slowly pull with my left, push with my right to get some rotation. And then I'm going to let go. Now, of course, we want to really focus on abdominals, that navel lift, and axial elongation, reaching our skull up as we look over our shoulder. And it's really important that we look where we're going, because wherever the cervical spine travels, it'll tell the lumbar spine to do as well. So the great thing about having my leg up against the box, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to twist the pelvis. So I'm going to cue first, abduct, pressing the thigh lightly into it, and you'll find that both legs will kind of react a little bit, and that's going to also help stable if I press the leg into the box. So once I get there, I'm going to just twist again, pushing lightly with the hand on the box, and then release. And then again. Now our goal is to prevent our stable leg that's in the grounded leg, this is my stable leg, is to prevent it from moving too. If you have a student that's collapsing, what I will do oftentimes is put a yoga block in there. Give them some feedback whether or not they're collapsing. So if you're finding yourself collapsing in that knee, just give yourself a little prop there. It doesn't hurt to help assist with propping. So we're going to do this 3 more times. Lengthen up, navel's lifting, pull left, lightly push right, and twist. And 2 more. And 1. Now let's reverse doing the other side. The other thing about method classes is I don't want to compound my movements one after another because it's going to be confusing for them what it is we're looking for. So it takes a little bit longer in a method class because we're taking our time doing one movement at a time as opposed to compounding 5 to 6 like in a flow. So let's go ahead and 90 degrees on the well leg. We're hugging up against, placing our right hand, and then let's get our right hand not by flexing, but let's get our right hand to that strap by rotating. That in and of itself may be challenging. Press the right knee out to get it tracking with the toe. Press the left thigh lightly into it, into the box edge. Lengthen up and exhale to twist. Inhale to look over the right shoulder. Exhale, rotate, looking over left. Inhale, release. Exhale to twist. And I've got a light push and pull with my hands just to help facilitate that rotation and get that nice stretch. Always, always feel your abdominals contract and the skull reach up. Let's do one more. And release. Let's go back to the original position. Now, before we put any tension on the inner thighs or hamstrings, let's do this lateral flexion with both knees bent. So I'm doing 90 degrees, hands on the foot bar. I've got the foot bar vertical. If you don't have that option, just scoot closer to the foot bar and lower the hand down. So I want to be at least an arm length away. Right arm is up, and I'm going to slightly bend and then back up. Let's do 3 of those. I really want to prevent collapsing. My cue is to reach the skull to that angle as opposed to the ear down. All right, so there's 3. Let's go ahead and switch. The great thing about going back and forth is it's a lot of movement for our older students that they're not going to get. It's a lot of core, it's a lot of transitioning and switching, which in and of itself is work for them. So get ourselves up, set up. Let's go ahead and put the right hand on the foot bar an arm length away. Up to you where you want it, whether you want it farther back to get a pec stretch, but for today, let's just put it wherever it feels comfortable. Lengthen the spine, left arm is up, and stretch. And then lengthen through the skull to come up, and then side bend. If somebody's complaining about back pain, have them inhale on lateral flexion. And then back. So when you're doing this sequence, just for time, because I've got a lot to cover today, I'm staying it with 3 reps. I would probably in a method class do 5 up to 10. Now, any of my method classes, I will always repeat the exact same format, the program, 30 days later. So I'm not going to go and mix a lot of things up and introduce them to so many different movements. I want to keep them really basic and repeat them so they can start seeing their progression. And it's always important with new students 30 days later to congratulate them on consistency and whether or not you see a really big difference. Sometimes some of the newer students, you're not going to see that big of a difference, but their consistency and their ability to do the exercise, maybe their range of motion isn't increasing, but their ability to transition is more smoother, getting from one side. So I'm going to take up a notch and we're going to add a little bit more stretch to the inner thigh. I've scooted my hip away, but that doesn't mean I'm going to keep that knee up against the box. I want to make sure I'm not pinching on the spring side edge in my thigh. So I'm going to get set nice and easy. I'm going to put one hand on the foot bar. Now, this is what we want to prevent, all the shifting in the pelvis. So oftentimes we're on a stable base, we don't notice that shifting, but when we're without springs, we really have to control. So I'm going to show you without control, see how it shifted? So I'm going to cue you and my students in the class to make sure the bed doesn't shift out. So really keep that length, have that light pull, which is going to also help, and side bend. The great thing about me is my leg length. Now I'm on the 18-inch reformer off the ground. So if you're on the 14-inch, you're not going to have this length. But for me, it's the perfect from my shin to my foot, my knee to my foot. So let's do 3. Stabilize in that box on the carriage and side bend. And 1 more. You can always have them shift like I did, organize, and then side bend. Let's switch the sides. Put the toe at the corner. Make sure that the foot's on the floor and we slid just enough away. We're not pinching in inner thigh. Take the left leg snug against that box. Hand is on the bar. Shift, organize, and then side bend. And back. Shift, organize, side bend. And last one. Stay organized and rest. Let's switch back. So when we're doing that, anytime you can show a student or have a student feel where their disorganization is versus always cueing them to fix it. Allow them to slump and shift and then organize and ask them to hold that. Instead of always saying, okay, let's side bend and like you're shifting or you're bending. Allow them to have that because it's positive reinforcement versus negative. And I'll tell you what, when my students are allowed to have a sloppy movement, have a sloppy posture first, have a shift in their pelvis and then organize, they really start learning faster as opposed to giving them the exercise and cueing organization as we go, because that can get frustrating. All right, so we started with the leg at the forward angle. Now we're going to abduct the hip. So put your hand on the frame in the back, hand on the box, and slowly widen your leg. So now I've got it facing center instead of at the corner. I'm still pressing knee up, and then I'm going to grab, shift over without losing my organization, and let's do 3 there. So for some students, they're not going to feel anything. They're not going to notice much difference. Other students with really tight inner thighs, this is going to really feel different. So let's now switch, put right foot center, get ourselves set. Knee is snug against the box. Toe is pointed. Hand is on the foot bar. Go to your sloppy. Go to your organize. Maintain organize for 3, 2, and 1. Great. All right. So, as I mentioned in the beginning of this segment, if that was challenging for you and you weren't able to stabilize without feeling a strain, please know the difference between a stretch and a strain. The difference between a stretch feels good, is enjoyable, a strain feels bad. So always know yourself and your abilities. So now, if you felt that that was on the verge of a strain, keep your leg there for 3 reps. If not, let's abduct the hip more. Hand on the frame, bring the leg back even more. Make sure your pelvis doesn't twist towards it. So try to keep yourself straight forward. Knee is against the box. Reaching over to grab the bar, arm is up. And let's unshift or shift and then organize. And then hold that organization for 3, 2, and 1. If you've taught your students or anatomy at all, you can always cue right sit bone to left inner knee. Because when I do that, I want to keep that connection, and that's going to also help them stabilize. But also, just telling them don't move the bed is another thing. All right, so let's now move the right foot to the back corner, progressing our ability for flexibility. Let's get ready. Hand is on the foot bar. Shift out of alignment. Find alignment. And side bend stretch. Keeping that left sitting bone connected to the right inner knee. And then switch back. So now let's talk about progressing that. Started with bent knee, then we did straight leg, then we offered variations of hip abduction. And those are all just variations. Now, let's say you know your student and you're doing a private and you want to do this, but you know that point 2 and 3 of the foot are going to be out of the equation. Just do point 1. And you can go both ways as far as lateral flexion. I'm going to show you before we put the foot on the gray strip. If you have somebody that cannot bring the leg back, you can laterally flex this way, laterally flex this way. You can also laterally flex, rotate, laterally flex, rotate. So you can add a little bit of rotation and flexion too. So now let's take the leg up to the gray strip on one of our pads. Option A is toes over. Not all students can do that. Option B is heel on, which is probably going to be a little bit more stable. So you might want to try it with your students. If you're doing this yourself, try a few where your toe is on or heel is on. My preference is heel, but I've found some students to dorsiflex their heel is too much. So by having the toe on, you can be in plantar flexion, which is going to be less tension on that Achilles tendon and posterior leg. If you are on the heel, you can add choreography too. You can do some points, flexes, and bends, but for today, we're going to keep it simple. Just remember, everything we're going over today is a basic standard movement principles of variations and progressions to build on. So you can take any one of these exercises, build a flow onto it, even in a regular class. If you're having a student where they can't hold the shift with the leg up, put a yellow spring on. Today, we're going to do it without a yellow spring. So I'm going to find my organization, hand on the foot bar, arm up, in for 3, 2, and 1. Great. So when we teach inhalation on lateral flexion, and we'll talk about this more in other segments, but I have a client that was a big belly breather. And every time he inhaled, he wasn't able to maintain core strength. So I took a yoga belt and I put it on not super tight, but tight enough to where we can really start feeling. And when he did this, he's like, ooh, I can get that sense that I'm breathing there. So if you have a belly breather and we really need to start finding some breath in their ribs, some posterior lateral costal breathing, which is breathing through the ribs, or breathing into the chest, or breathing into the upper back, wherever it is you're sending the breath, sometimes a yoga belt can give you that feedback. So give that a try on yourself first, if you haven't done that, and then apply that to a student that may be always belly breathing and not really getting that nice abdominal contraction. All right, let's go to the other side. Foot on the first grippy, plantar flex like that, or dorsiflex up, hand on, arm up, and let's do for 3, 2, beware of thoracic collapse, so always cue length through your skull. Great. Let's go back. Now we're going to take it to the center pad. And if you're doing this with me and you find that, ooh, this is just pulling on, do not go to the center. Remember, find the position and just do your 3 reps, knowing that's where you want to work up to. Stack your spine, organize right sit bone to left inner knee, hand on foot bar, and for 3, 2, and 1. Let's go back, placing our right heel on center, hand on, dorsiflex, organize, in 3, 2, and 1. The wonderful thing about this setup, for a lot of students that are collapsing when they laterally flex, this gives them so much feedback, stability in the leg, and instead of going to the ground, they can really pull themselves to the foot bar, to start teaching a better lateral flexion. That's where this one came up. Not the progression. The progression came later. But when I had students that were really collapsing on lateral flexion, I thought, okay, how do I find a stable base to teach them where it is we want to move, as opposed to, as I said earlier, always correcting their form? Give them success, put them in a position that stabilizes them enough to understand what we're trying to say. So if you have the ability to put it on the back, make sure you rotate. And I like to grab and kind of twist myself just to make sure I'm in a good position. Then I'm going to put my hand on the foot bar. If it helps to put the hand a little bit more forward to rotate yourself to the right, that's great, because sometimes when the hand is back, we'll collapse because we don't have that degree of rotation. Arm is up. Dorsiflex that foot if you can. Right sit bone to left inner knee connect. Abs are in. And for 3, 2, and 1. That feels really good. I needed this today. So let's go ahead and switch. Put your right foot on the back, the third point we're working on. Get yourself rotated. I have scoliosis, so this side is a really tight. I want to twist in with my foot, so I've got to really pay attention to that. And if you're doing a private, you can always put your hand where their foot is, put the hand here, and just tell them to feel and keep that connection against your hand. I've done that before. So I'm rotated, lifted up, hand is on, dorsiflexed, and I'm stable. Arm is up, and that's 3, 2, and 1. All right. So that's the basic setup. Now, for more advanced, I'm going to put that in 3 or 2, position 2, which is your standard position. With these infinity foot bars, you'll hear me sometimes, just out of habit, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's basic, the whole top one is 1. So I'm going to put it at 2, which is, I think, roughly the standard. And I'm going to put my foot up. I'm going to curl the toe over, and I'm going to get myself nice and set. And then I'm going to reach over and grab the bar. Now, if you cannot do that, hand on the frame. So let's start with hand on the frame today. Make sure if your foot is slipping, if you even have grippy socks and you don't have the toe grip strength, please put a grippy pad on for assistance. Hands on the frame, organize, prevent the carriage from moving for 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and switch with a foot high. That doesn't mean that you can't start it lower. So please, if that lifting it up from that low position and that's too aggressive for you, drop it down even 1 more. Toe is on to the first position that we started, which toe is forward. Get my toe on, get myself organized. Remember, again, add a yellow spring if you're unable to stay connected. Reach hand on the frame, arm up, side bend for 3, 2, and 1. Now, if you want to add some choreography, flex, point, stretch, or point, flex, and stretch. That's where I talk about building on. Let's do foot in center. Get yourself set up. Hand on the frame. So to get my hand on the frame, it's really important you're not bending in the spine. You're actually abducting the hip. So watch me very carefully. You'll see a lot of when I'm doing either standing or side bending, kneeling, I really talk about flexing at the hip versus rounding in the spine to the side. So to get my hand down, flex at the hip, arm is up, abduction, abduction, sorry, not flexion. And 3, 2, and 1. And remember, the movement doesn't need to be huge. It's not about stretching in the spine, even though a lot of people will find that. It's about getting some adductor stretch while staying connected and stable. Let's go to the other side. Foot at center, toes curled. Get yourself nice and set. Get my toes stable. This one's a little needing a grippy, but I think I can make it today. So to get your hand on the frame, shift by abducting the hip. This inner thigh is super tight on me. And let's go for 3, 2, and 1. I like to grab the back of the knee to lower down so I don't strain. All right. For those of you who have that inner thigh flexibility, let's go to the third point over here. Rotate, get yourself set up, get your foot on, flex or abduct in the hip, and let's go for 3, 2, 1. The great thing about having the hand on the frame is I can push into it to prevent rotation towards the ground or thoracic flexion. So that's very helpful. Let's go back to this side, put the foot on, get yourself organized. I feel like I need to wipe my bar down. It's kind of oily. That's my excuse. All right, so hand is on the frame by flexing and abducting in the hip. Lengthen up, and let's go for 3, 2, and 1. And then back. All right, so there's some basic progression from a regressed state up, giving yourself options whether the knee is bent or not. Now we're going to do some stomach massage variations. So a lot of our students, stomach massage is a great exercise, but people with super tight hamstrings, they're going to be tucked under and they're going to be loading their back. So for me personally, I don't want to put a student into a stomach massage position, even knowing it's going to be good for them over time. I want to give them a regressed state of that and offer them the ability to find it later. So without springs, we're going to go and sit forward. I want my butt up against the shoulder rest to start. And I'm still just going to do a nice turnout, high heel lift. I'm going to get fairly close. Let's go ahead and put foot bar in 1. So you're going to see the progressions from this regress state. You can also see that this is the same setup as a stomach massage. The only difference is the feet are not up and we're not in flexion. We're not rolled under. We'll get to that in a moment. But what we're going to do is simply press out and back in. It's a small movement because our hamstrings are on, but it's just going to get us a little bit of a stretch in our spine as we flex. Really cueing to flex at the spine. So the great thing about this is so many people that are hip flexors, you can keep this the box here and tell them to keep their sacrum on, and then they can start feeling, oh, there's my flexion of my lower back versus hip flexion, because you'll feel the sacrum come away. So as I will mention almost ad nauseum, it's really great to find propping to help students feel their body, because posterior, we kind of don't know what's going on back there a lot of the time. So let's do 3 reps for 3. Really keeping that sacrum on as we stretch the spine. And 1. So that's your basic. Now you can scoot forward with the sit bones, telling your students or yourself to keep that feeling of that box is still there. You can slide it forward if you want that feedback. And for 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and put the box away. When we take our feet up to the gray strip, we want to roll under. So what I'm going to do is show you my progression to start. I'm starting with my pelvis up. I do not want to collapse. So I'm going to put a rod from my base of my spine at my rib cage, and I'm going to go all the way up to my skull. So my goal is not to come forward and around, even though that's taught that way. Today we're so kyphotic and so collapsed with our personal devices and our phones that I want to stay in extension. And I want to roll under to find that scoop, to find that rounding. And let's do two more. Skull pulls us out of it, not feet pushing. Sit bones roll forward, and to come out of it, we don't want to push our sit bones back. We want to lengthen up to find that. Now let's go to a straight leg if we have that ability, and then stack our spine as our knees bend and roll. And back up and stretch. Stack our spine as our knees bend and roll our sit bones forward. Pull our skull back up and stretch. Let's do one more. Stack our spine as our knees bend. Roll our hips under and forward. So the great thing about teaching it in this is when I roll my hips forward, I can eventually take my hands off and then find that C curve. Versus so many of our students, like I said, are tight in their hamstrings. They lack not core strength always, just awareness, what's going on. And you will often see when we do stomach massage that people are rounded and collapsed. I've even seen some of the old videos of Pilates, and they are teaching them to round the shoulders in. Now, I believe if you're teaching classical and that's how you're taught, that's obviously I'm not trying to tell you to do something different, but I want to offer another perspective. I want to say, hey, we're always collapsed. Let's see if we can teach that extension and roll under to get that C curve feeling. All right. So now that we've got it there, we're going to hold on and let's go heels. Let's do heels at the edge wide, which is another variation. So I'm abducting my hip. We're going to start with straight legs. We're going to lean forward by pulling ourselves to get that spine stretch. We're going to stack our spine, bend our knees, and then roll hips. Pull skull up to sit up tall, extend your legs, and pull yourself to a stretch, pulling that navel in and up to get that nice support. Stack your spine, bend the knees, roll hips, and back up and forward. So that's some great opportunity to teach the students what it is you want them to feel, where it is you want them to move before you put them in a pretzel shape, such as stomach massage with feet on the bar. So let's go ahead and take our foot bars down, and let's take, so that's 3, and let's put 1 blue on, and let's push ourselves out. So I know stomach massage has so many different variations. Hands here, we can do rotation. So if you're gonna do rotation, I would say, let me put this back up while I explain that. I like to put one hand at center. I'm gonna straighten my legs, and to get them straight, I twist. So the great thing is about having the hand on is I would not believe how many people go offline and collapse when they're rotating. So this way, this helps facilitate rotation. So press out, and if you want to get to a straight leg, you've got to rotate, and you can take the hand on the box, and then back. And let's switch. Right hand on, left hand over. Start pressing out. Open the arm out. If you want to get your legs straight, do it by twisting. Let me just show you what we want to stay away from. Do you see how I collapsed in? So when I'm neutral, that's as far as I can go. But the great thing is the arm being at my center is already going to help me twist. And then I can reach back. Let's do 3 each side just so you can get this feeling. So left under, right over, stack your spine, press it out. Once you got to the arm is straight, take your right arm off, and then rotate grab the box edge just to help stabilize, and then back. 2 more, press out and twist. 1 more, press out and twist. Switching sides, press out, twist. Really, really tight my right obliques. I can feel that when I get to full extension. And last one. And students with really tight legs and a really tight spine are going to stop where they have to. All right, so that's the option rotation. For some reason, I felt it necessary to show it first. All right, so for those students that can come up to here, you can also start this right there, just teaching that forward stretch. Hands are on. I like to do fingernails because my hands can kind of get a little non-slippery, I guess. And I'm just going to slide forward and back up. If you have the ability to do it open chain, that's fine. But a lot of students will need to keep it closed chained and keep your hands on something. Point your foot, so we're not adding any ankle choreography because most of our students in method classes are going to be tight. And let's start by 3. Keeping your sacrum on there as best you can, 2, so we're getting that nice lumbar flexion. Always cue forward, never down, and 1. If you can grab the foot bar with fingertips, or you have that ability, you can do that, and then back up. Open chain without hands, I would add a hug a tree, take arms forward, and grab the bar or fingertip touch, and back for 2. Stack up through the skull, and 1. If you have the ability to grab it and do some calf work, you can do that as well. Let's lower the right leg down, and let's just go ahead and do a nice little stretch, both directions. Now let's say you can't get to the foot bar. Lower the leg down, bring the foot bar back up, and twist. So noticing I'm not staying vertical anymore because we're starting to add that lumbar flexion into the mix. So twist, lumbar flex. Twist, lumbar flex. So you're starting to get a little bit more mobilization of the spine. Let's do a couple with the right foot up, left foot down. And again, I'm facing forward as opposed to turned out. Let's twist and bend and up. Switch, twist, and bend. So if you are able to do foot on the bar, here's what that variation or progression looks like. Facing forward instead of turned out with the body like we started with. Sit up nice and tall and twist. Back up and twist. Back up. Switch legs. I want to do foot to center because then I'm going to get a much better stretch. You can abduct the hip if you want, but play around with different things. Today I'm just going to teach you and go over foot to center. So let's go ahead and twist, getting that nice IT stretch, and flex, and twist, and flex. All right, so that kind of takes you through the basic stomach massage variations. I'm going to take the box. Actually, I don't need the box off. I'll just come forward. So now we're going to go to a V turnout. There's often times where my students complain of wrist pain. So I like to put my elbows on the box, and I'm going to go ahead and get that little rotation, flexion of the lumbar. And I'm not pulling up. So you'll hear me talk a lot about pubic bone up. Try not to tail tuck. Here's what happens with the carriage when I tail tuck. It doesn't really move. So I want to get that lumbar length by really reaching the sit bones forward to get myself into that C curve and back. If you want to go out of it and then find it again, and close and open, that's great. So by having the short box on, elbows on, be very aware that they're not sinking. So I will tell them, kind of like on a pommel horse in gymnastics, I'm pressing to lift up. That's going to help facilitate that spine length versus when we have our arms off where it's so easy to collapse. So really lift out of that pommel horse, strong shoulders, roll the sit bones under, and let's go for 3, 2, and 1. So that's another variation to do that nice prep setup. Get into these positions, try them, find out what you like, what you don't like, and again, build on that. Find different ways to do it. There's just so much. Okay, so we hit inner thighs and outer thighs. We got a little hamstrings while we're here. So let's stand up, take the springs off, and let's go back for some more hamstrings. I recently had a student, let's take the box off, we're done with that for now, rupture his Achilles tendon. So he's in a boot and he's sitting a lot. So his posterior, everything is tight, hip flexors are tight, and we can't take the boot off. So what I did is I started with a simple hamstring stretch, which for most people, you're not gonna really feel it. For me, I'm fairly flexible in the hamstrings. But for students that are not, this is going to feel really intense. So just to get the black knobs out of the way, I'm going to drop my swivel pulleys down just because I want to put my hand on here. I'm going to put my right leg fairly snug up against the frame, maybe an inch or two, because otherwise I don't want to whack my shin or my knee depending on my leg length. And let's just start with the foot here. Press up, organize, make sure the heel is slightly on because we want to come out to that position. If you're sliding on your heel because maybe you have really soft, slippery skin, grippy pad that uh, for safety. All right, stand up nice and tall and simply extend and bend. In fact, I'm a little slippery. Let me grab a grippy pad. And put it right there. Get position. If you have somebody with instability, turn their foot out because parallel is going to be a challenge to keep that glute stable. All right, so let's try that again. Get yourself set and just extend. Now you may be saying, I feel nothing. Trust me, some students like this, they're going to feel a ton. So now you're going to extend it out. If you have the ability to flex in the hips to come forward and get a little deeper stretch, add that in. Let's do 3 more. Extend the leg, using yourself to hold, flex forward at the hip, getting that stretch, and then come back up. Let's do 1 more. And really prevent movement in the spine. So left foot parallel, right heel on, organize the hips and upper body, pull it back, and extend for 3, and then we'll add some hip flexion. 2, and 1. Now let's add a little bit deeper stretch on that hamstring. This is another great way to get a nice knee bend and a deep knee bend without any load. Extend, extend the leg. My apologies, I have a really dry throat. Flex at the hip and then back up as you bend the knee. Extend the leg, flex at the hip and back up. 1 more. Excellent. All right, let's go back, putting the right foot down, left heel on. We're going to get a little bit deeper for those students that have that ability. We're going to place our hands on the shoulder rests. Now, without any springs, you've got to really control your ability to move. Otherwise, you're going to fall over. I've actually put a pad or a side yoga block to make sure that they're not smashing their shin. So feel free to put a yoga block here and kind of hold it on your shin if you need that extra stability. So organize your shoulders, lift out, abs are in. Go ahead and slowly push out. Once you get to a point, flex and back. I'm going to lower my foot a tiny bit more. You need to make adjustments for your leg length and your arm length, so find something that works for you. Start pushing out with your hands to initiate it. Lift your ball of your foot off and stretch. Now that's very aggressive for a lot of students, so be very mindful that they have core control and they only go out where they feel a stretch, not a strain. Let's do one more. Push out with the hands. Make sure that standing glute is stable and let it pull you into that spine and hamstring stretch. You know, depending on how tight you are in the back, your degree of dorsiflexion, and I'll show you what I'm talking about, is up to you. So mine right there, if I go any more, it's going to be a strain. So you may find you can point the toe all the way up. So let's switch. Bring it all the way in. Flex at the hips and spine to get your hands on. Lift out of your shoulders. Strong length through the neck. Start pushing out with the hands. Letting the ball of the foot lift off. And go to a stretch and back. If you have a student that lacks control, that yoga block is going to really prevent them from going too far forward. You can also kneel, and I've done this in privates. If you're doing in this group class, it's different. But if it's a private, you can always block the carriage, prevent them from going too far. And that's also going to help them feel more stable and secure. So let's go ahead and initiate with arms, lifting the ball of the foot up. Abs are in, dorsiflex and stretch. And last one. Now, if you've got a reformer on the ground, that means that's quite a bit of flexion to get down, to get your hands down. So here is a modification I'll show you for the shorter reformers. Put the long box on. This can be done even if you don't have them, even if you have a taller reformer. Go ahead and hold on here. And you can go, let me hop it forward. I'm gonna actually show you a variation turned out. So hands are on, and you're gonna go there. You can either do hands on the top, and that just is so you don't have to go down so far, but it also helps students stabilize. Now you can change this from a stretch to some hamstring work just by adding a spring. So let's go ahead and go over that. I'll leave the box on for this variation. This helps facilitate the stretch, but it also requires you to work really hard. Now, if you find that the yellow spring is too much for you, let me show you my trick. You've probably seen it in a couple other different videos. So I've got my toe now there, so I'm gonna prevent my foot from sliding, so it kind of helps a little bit, but that works for me specifically because of my leg length. So you're gonna stretch, and that spring's gonna do it for you, but then you have to pull back. I'm gonna pull my heel back a little bit more so I'm not so congested. I've still got my toe there. And stretch. Back up. And stretch. Now, let's say that yellow spring is too much for you. Get a set, let me go off camera to show you, get a set of Hooked on Pilates handy bands. And I'll show you the variation without the box. It's important to try all of these variations. So this is how wonderful the handy bands are. I'm going to pull this up to standard position, and I'm going to loop this around the big loop. Make sure it's snug on the rope, not on the actual band. And then I'm going to put the band over the shoulder rest. Then I'm going to pull the yellow spring off. And I'm going to even, let me just see. Yeah, that's going to be about a quarter of a yellow. You can choke it up, or you can use a green spring too and play around with what works for you. So we just did the left. So now let's try this guy out. Turned out We're doing the hands-on. We've added that tension, but it's too heavy for the yellow, so we're going to use the band. And slowly go to a stretch and back for 3, 2, and 1. Take that off. So that's a nice option to do a variation for the hamstring stretch. So I'm going to definitely do more flexibility method classes. We're running out of time, and I could continue to go on, but keeping it with inner thighs, some spine rotation, some spine flexion, and some hamstrings today. That's where we're going to go. If you have any questions, please use the comment section below the video. If you want to ask me a question and you don't want it to be public, send me an email. You'll hear me say this a lot lately. I didn't start saying this because I didn't have the comment set up. And as the website develops, as I start getting more feedback, what you guys are looking for, we're going to be kind of retooling a few of the pages to make them a little bit easier for you to find, especially the, what's it called? It's the My Account page. We're going to make that a little bit more user-friendly. And we got some really great feedback on that. So whether it's a feedback and questions and comments about the exercise, about your reformer height, about your reformer style, please share that with me in the comment sections. When you share it in the comment sections, you might help assist somebody else that's having the same problem too. So remember, it's a community here and we're all trying to learn and grow from each other. Thank you for joining me for today's method class on progressions, variations, starting at a regress straight on lower extremity flexibility.